It's an authoritarian regime. I'm going to say it right now. This is full-blown authoritarianism now. People have been using the phrase "the guardrails are down" with respect to several cases this week.
Hi, I'm Fergus Macphee, and welcome to the Trump Report, and welcome to our new channel. Just to say right now that if you're looking for Times Radio content, please head to the Times' YouTube channel. This channel is now the Trump Report. You'll be getting episodes of the Trump Report every day, Monday through Friday, as well as Frontline as well, and lots of other good content. Now, joining me today, it could only be one person for our first show on the new channel. Scott Lucas, how are you?
It is fantastic to be here to help you launch this. I'm just presuming you couldn't find anyone else, so I'm getting to be the guy to kick it off.
Not at all, Scott. I mean, we've said so many times last week how much of a busy start to 2026 it's been. This week is no different. We're going to start a little bit actually with something that is new, different to last week, and that's the news around the Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell. You know, he's repeatedly been in Donald Trump's crosshairs over the last year, mainly for not cutting interest rates as quickly as the president might like. Now, he's already threatened to remove him several times in 2025, and his successor is due to be named at the end of the month. Last night, though, things took a little bit of a turn because Powell announced that the US Department of Justice has opened criminal investigations into him. We will get into the specifics in just a moment, but Scott, what's your reaction to that?
What the hell's going on here? I mean, that's my reaction. But here's, Fergus, even in Trump land, why this doesn't make sense. And that is Jerome Powell is due to go in May, right? He will have served his 8 years. He has held on despite Trump's threats to replace him over the past year. But, you know, we're 4 months away. So why now? You could make the argument that it's, you know, that the economy has gotten into such a critical position that the Trump folks are scrambling and panicking. And I think the economy is eroding. I don't think it's doing very well, but it's not like it's absolutely tanking right now. So my easiest explanation here is this is just nasty Trump, in that anyone who doesn't do his bidding is not only going to be criticized, he has to try to punish them, persecute them. That's what the word is here. This campaign against Powell has been going on for months on different fronts. We know that Trump has launched the personal insults, somehow believing that he, a complete economic moron, knows more than Jerome Powell about interest rates, about the state of the US economy, about inflation. But we know that it has shifted to this idea that somehow Powell is corrupt. Now, once again, given Donald Trump's own personal history, his own convictions in a civil court for fraud, that's a bit rich. But that doesn't matter to Trump. As we have seen on repeated occasions, he pardons those who actually are culpable, and he goes after those who he thinks have wronged him. And I think that's the simplest explanation here for why he has cut loose against Powell, by using his political lackeys, by using the Justice Department to go after Powell. Now, I will add one thing that I think is a layer of detail to go into. There's a guy named Bill Pulte, who is head of, I think, the Federal Housing Administration, you know, technically something to do with housing and mortgages and so on. He has been called Little Trump because he is a political attack dog. He has, up to this point, been most notorious for using these trumped up, pun intended, charges, you know, that people have been defrauding on their mortgage applications to go after Trump's foes. He's used it against Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, who got the civil conviction for fraud on Trump or the Trump organization. I think he's used it against Lisa Cook as well, who is a member of the Federal Reserve. The story is that Bill Pulte was pushing for this inside the Trump administration. So it wasn't just Trump going after Powell. Pulte's like, now, whether he's got agreements with Powell, whether he just wants to look good for Trump, you have a combination of Trump and certain advisors, which is why this has come out.
Well, Powell said in no uncertain terms that I think he kind of agrees exactly with what you're saying. He said in a statement last night, there's quite a lot to it, but I'll read out a little bit of it. The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public rather than following the preferences of the president. I mean, that's pretty damning.
No, I mean, and that's just simply saying the facts as they are, that the Federal Reserve has gradually brought interest rates down in the last few months. You know, for those who want the economic story, this gradual decrease in interest rates was supposed to come in early 2025. That's what we were looking at, because in the last year of the Biden administration, inflation had come down significantly. It was down to around about 3%. You were getting what was this soft landing out of COVID and the pandemic economy. Then Trump gets elected. And the problem that you have is that he and his minions, including Chainsaw Elon, immediately start ripping apart the government. So there's no sensible economic planning which is going on in the first part of 2025. And then on top of it is the tariff nonsense. Now, without going into the details of economically what happens, when you slap tariffs on, it immediately hits Americans. It hits American consumers, American manufacturers, American importers, American farmers, and it raises cost. And if you raise cost, you have to raise prices to cover the cost. And if you raise prices, you spike inflation. And if you spike inflation, the worst thing you can do is suddenly drop interest rates. So Powell has to hold the line in 25 because of what Trump has done. But Trump, again, has no concept of economic reality. We know that. We know that he's dedicated to the tariffs. So what happens is this move, which is, all right, let's prosecute him on, again, and again, I can go into details as much as you want to, why this is complete nonsense about the building.
Well, let's talk about those charges, because according to the administration, the reason this subpoena has been brought is due to renovations the Fed's carrying out to sort of kind of modernize two of its main buildings. Now, Trump's been very critical of that regarding the cost. He suggests that it will now cost $3.1 billion rather than the forecast of $2.5 billion. Just reading that, even whether that's true or not, I'm not quite sure where the criminal charges are coming from in that.
Hey, here's something that's a surprise to folks. Sometimes you have cost overruns on projects, you know, and when you have cost overruns on projects, that's an economic issue that you have to pick up with your contractors, your builders, and so on. But it's not criminal. It's a question of, effectively, that your estimate basically wasn't exactly right. Now, in fact, you can't trust Trump's numbers on this. You can't trust Trump's numbers because a few months ago, there's an episode where he's walking with Jerome Powell, and and they're taking a tour of the facility, and he tries to hijack Powell, right, by waving this random piece of paper, saying, "Look, this is, you've spent billions of dollars." And Powell says, "Let me look at that piece of paper." And he says, politely and respectfully, "Well, Mr. President, I'm afraid that these costs you're showing me are actually for projects that have already been completed. They're for other buildings." Yeah, exactly. So it's like, so we have no clue if Trump's even accurate in terms of it. But even if he was accurate, one, there's no criminal behavior. And two, Jerome Powell is not in charge of the Federal Reserve building project, right? He is in charge of the Federal Reserve as a financial institution handling interest rates. That's like saying, you know, "Hey, Fergus, you've got a bit of a cost overrun with this Times Radio relaunch." I'm sure you haven't. You got a bit of a cost overrun with this Times Radio relaunch, and your brand new spanking quarters here looking so good on YouTube. We're going to charge you, Fergus, with criminal behavior. And you go, "Wait a minute, I'm just the guy presenting the program here. Why are you coming after me?" So no, it's entirely bogus. And as with so many things, if you look ahead, you just wonder if Republicans in Congress are going to draw a line here and say, "Look, this is just absolutely ridiculous. This is nonsense," because the effect of this is a little bit different from Trump's other ridiculous behavior.
Do you think that's likely? Yeah, I've seen a few high-profile Republicans already speaking out. Do you think that's likely they would draw a line?
I think they might. I think they may here, Fergus, because the problem that you have here is, one is it's completely unnecessary what he's doing. And two is that you're shaking the markets and you're shaking the business community again. Trump's already roiled the markets and the business community, but they've had to price this in. They've had to adjust to tariffs. They've had to adjust to his big, not so beautiful bill. And the fundamental here is that you want stability and predictability. Now, if you're talking about that you've effectively thrown the Federal Reserve into paralysis at the least, or if you're just going to make it a political hostage, right? You don't get that predictability and certain because the Fed operates in terms of economic considerations. Markets and business operate in terms of economic considerations. They don't operate in terms of political whims. So yeah, I think it could shake some Republicans up. We'll see some pushback in the next 48, 72 hours.
Well, yeah, one word that I've seen get so much airtime in the last 24 hours from economists and experts discussing this is unprecedented. Essentially, they're kind of saying that for a modern sort of 21st century democracy, attempting to remove and bring charges against the head of monetary policy, I don't know why they're so surprised, because unprecedented is a word we've used a lot to describe this administration.
It's not unprecedented now, okay? This is what an authoritarian regime does. I could give you examples from other countries around the world. I could talk to you about Russia, although Vladimir Putin has not gone as far as Trump has in terms of this nonsense. He's actually got some pretty good economic advisors, which is one reason why he's still able to keep pushing this invasion of Ukraine, despite the fact that it's not working too well. China can do this. Iran can do this. North Korea can certainly do this. And that is, you get like a political decision made, which is our agencies, our officials operate only at our, as long as we want them to. And once we decide we don't want them to, they're gone. I think when I first, and I woke up to this news this morning because a colleague of mine said, you got to see the video. And my immediate worry was Powell's going to step aside because there's an investigation going on. And I think that was the Trump intent, is just to absolutely bully him out of office. Thank God, Jerome Powell, for whom I have a great deal of respect. I have a great deal of respect for him in terms of his economic knowledge, but I've got respect for him now in terms of his personal fortitude here. He came out and said what needed to be said. He didn't hide behind the fact, I can make no comment. I cannot do. You gave the quote earlier on where he simply pulled the curtain back and said, yeah, this is a political witch hunt because I'm not doing what the authoritarian or the wannabe authoritarian wants me to do.
You named a few countries there where this has been allowed to happen. If, going back to what we said earlier, if this doesn't sort of get opposed by Congress and is allowed to happen, what does that say about the US?
It's an authoritarian regime. I'm going to say it right now. And I started saying this last spring, is it authoritarian? I can remember the first time I thought about, which actually the first time I used it, it was in connection with ICE, Immigrations and Custom Enforcement, who'd been in the news this week. And it was in when they were going after the personal data of people going into the United States. And I said, this is what an authoritarian regime does. This is full-blown authoritarianism now. People have been using the phrase, the guardrails are down, with respect to several cases this week. There's the ICE case, there's this, there's the threats to Greenland, there's the way that they've handled Venezuela. There is the episode this morning where Donald Trump has declared himself the acting president of Venezuela. This is absolutely, and the systems are different. The United States is not North Korea. But in terms of a dear leader simply issuing a command, expecting everyone to obey, this is North Korean Kim Jong-un behavior, right? And I have to say at this point, I'm going to get your YouTube comments really rolling on day one of your relaunch here. The difference between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un is I can actually make more sense of what Kim Jong-un does. He's a nasty individual. North Korea is a nasty place in terms of how he operates, but I can give you a logical explanation for how he works. There is no economic logic or even political logic for what Trump does. There's only a personal logic which is fed by or exploited by certain advisors for their own means. And I think we just need to acknowledge that because we have operated for many, many decades, let's say since 1945, with the idea that the United States, for all its flaws, and it has quite a few flaws, but it is operated with a system which had rules and structures and institutions. And because we had those rules and structures and institutions, there were certain parameters. Things couldn't go outside of that. I have operated as an American, because I was taught this, like Americans for many generations before me, that we have a democratic system with its checks and balances, which will stop excessive behavior, and which in particular will prevent someone breaking the system or using it for personal power. That's our American myth. We don't have kings, right? That's gone. That is absolutely gone. Now, there is still a system there that may push back against Trump, and we can talk about it.
Is that system still in place, but maybe not working as it should?
It's breaking. It's breaking, and we are getting to a point where you have to say, will people make a stand where it's not broken? I mean, we can do this from the standpoint of the 2026 elections, and I don't want to. The midterms will be extremely important. They'll be again, most important election since 1865. I've said it every 2 years.
Well, this is the thing. I think, like you said earlier, I think it is becoming more and more difficult to argue that this regime is not acting in an authoritarian way. I guess you're right. I guess the proof is in, they still currently have free and fair elections and coming into the midterms this year.
But we don't even know about those elections now. We know, of course, the way that the gerrymandering has come in, where the Republicans have tried to tilt it. But we don't even have assurances that Trump and his inner circle will not try to come up with some scheme to suspend or to manipulate elections. He said in this New York Times interview, which has a whole lot of just horrible, horrible lines in it. But he said that in 2020, he should have used the National Guard to seize the voting machines. Now, there's a story behind that, which I'll tell you, and that is Michael Flynn, who is the QAnon sympathizer, the conspiracy theorist, the former general who was Trump's national security advisor for 3 weeks. Michael Flynn was in a meeting in the White House in December 2020, along with some other folks, and he proposed seizing the voting machines and declaring martial law. Now, on that occasion, certain Trump advisors said, you cannot do that. His legal counsel was one of them, for example, the White House counsel. What Trump is now saying is he should have done what Flynn suggested in 2020 because he lost that election, seized the voting machines. Now, but even now, Fergus, I'll go beyond that. I used to say, well, okay, the elections, they're still there. I'm not even sure we get to the elections without the fundamental crisis point, because I'll now talk, if I can bring in another topic, what ICE did and is doing in Minnesota, and they've been doing it for months, and we can talk a little bit about the facts around, Renee Nicole Good and her killing by an ICE agent. What they are doing across Minnesota in the past 40 hours is doubling down on the fact that there is no legal accountability for what they're doing. Having killed a woman, despite all the pushback, despite the videos, despite the witness statements that point out that they're lying about that killing, and they are lying. Kirstie Noem, the Homeland Security Director, I should say, not only doubled down on the lies, she's ordered hundreds of more ICE agents into Minnesota. There is video across social media today where you have got ICE agents sweeping into petrol stations, sweeping into parking lots, sweeping into restaurants, fast food eateries, and just seizing people with no regard to whether they are immigrants or citizens, with no regard to whether they, in terms of their legal status, if they are immigrants, they are just sweeping people. They are, you want me to give you the taglines first? I'm going to cut loose here. Welcome to the Stormtroopers. Welcome to Star Wars in 2026. But the thing is, on the 50th, or we're getting close to the 50th anniversary of Star Wars, we knew who the bad guys were. We knew who the authoritarians were. We knew who the people who destroyed planets were. The people who are in the Death Star right now, as the White House is literally being destroyed, they, for some people, still aren't the bad guys. They still spin the narrative that they're the ones who are saving America rather than threatening it, and saving the world rather than threatening that as well.
Well, let's dwell on that point, Scott, because since this happened, Renee Nicole Good's killing in Minnesota, I've seen so many accounts, particularly on X, suggesting that it was almost justified because of her political views, right? And we know that she was taking part in neighborhood patrol, observing ICE agents that day. But it's not just reserved to people online. J.D. Vance and the president themselves said that she behaved horribly and was part of a left-wing network. They called her an agitator. You obviously already mentioned Homeland Security, Kristi Noem said it was an act of domestic terrorism. I just want to, whatever you think about ICE, whatever you think about what's happening in Minnesota, since when did having a political opinion or a view be grounds to be killed?
Bingo. Because in an authoritarian regime, a political opinion can get you detained. A political opinion can get you persecuted. A political opinion can get you killed. So let's break the case down in terms of how.
Just quickly, I know it's a completely different case, but of course we've already seen this happen with Charlie Kirk as well last year.
Yeah, well, look, and the fact here is that when people on the left, and there were not that many, but when the people on the left who came out and said, look, Charlie deserved to die, other people on the left, you and I and a lot of other people called that out. So that's absolutely irresponsible, that no matter how appalling some of Charlie Kirk's opinions were, and quite a few of them were appalling, no one deserves to die for political opinions, point blank, right? Yeah, what do the folks in the Death Star do, right? They've sent the stormtroopers into Minnesota on the second day of their 30-day mission. As Minnesota state and local officials are saying, you're tearing up our communities. As people in Minnesota say, you're tearing up our communities. On day 2, they go in and what they're doing is they're outside of school, right? They are outside of school. They're in a neighborhood, and they're waiting for people who might be dropping their kids off at school or might be going to work or whatever, and they're going to try to sweep them, right? Now, they have no warrants for this. They have no warrants. They might do it through racial profiling, through ethnic profiling. They might just do it because they just stop everybody, right? Renee Nicole Good and her partner are coming back from having dropped their 6-year-old child off at school. Now, whether or not they happened to just come across this or whether they had decided, oh, we're going to join the watch on this, they joined the watch. Now, in America, you are allowed to have neighborhood watches. That is legal. You are allowed to watch your community to see if it is safe, to see what it's doing. Even if the threat is not a criminal, but federal agents, you are allowed to do this. You are allowed to carry whistles. You are allowed to shout. You are allowed to heckle, as long as you do not obstruct those federal agents carrying out their duties. The most you can say about Renee Nicole Good and her partner, Becca, is that their car was in the road. Yet the video clearly shows that they waved through ICE officers that were moving. They did not block them. And indeed, one of the ICE officers that moved through in a pickup was Agent Ryan, the person that would later kill Renee Nicole Good. And then when you get to the video itself, and I have watched this video, I've watched multiple videos now by witnesses and by Agent Ryan himself, when that was put out to somehow try to clear him. When ICE agents effectively threaten Renee Nicole Good, after she has told them, not being mean to you, I don't want to be mean to you, I'm not being, I have no grievance with you, right? I don't like, it's not that I hate you. One of the ICE agents goes up to the door, starts screaming at her, using expletives, sticks his hand inside the driver's seat. At that point, her partner, Becca Good, says, drive, right? She says it. When that car moves away at a slow speed, because remember, it's been snowing. You cannot go 40, 50 miles an hour when you are coming out of, in first gear, coming in the snow. The wheels of the car clearly turn away from an agent who has gone in front of the car, filming and holding a gun. That's Agent Ryan. He may have been lightly touched at most.
Yeah,
And there are no videos, even lightly touched at most.
that's right. There's the two. There's his. I've seen all the videos. There's his POV camera, which does make it sort of look like the car comes at him, and then there's the reverse angle when you sort of see the car drive very much sort of past him.
Yeah. What happened is because he's come around that car filming, so he's trying to intimidate him. He's got the gun pulled, right? And the reason why they released that video, they thought, oh, wait a minute, it's going to show the moment when he has to stop filming, and like all of a sudden, and they're saying, oh, that's when he got hit, but that's not what happened. If you actually look at what happened, he shifts the phone from one hand to the other because then he takes the shot. That's why that happened in that video. It had nothing to do with supposedly getting hit by a car. And then I'm going to have the same. And even if you buy the fact that he got grazed by the car coming through, that was shot 1. Shots 2 and 3 are after the car is passing him and he shot through the driver's window. And then I'll just remind everybody, I'm not going to use the words, but you know the expletives he used about the woman he had just killed.
Scott, let's just move on to Greenland to end our conversation. This is the topic that so far in 2026 will not really go away. And the president turned the temperature up again last night when he said that the US will acquire the country one way or the other. Last time I spoke to you, you said it was sort of time to take some of Donald Trump's threats seriously. I mean, he seems quite serious about invasion there.
How dare you? God, you're not giving me any easy ones today, right? There's nothing here to bring my temperature down. Actually, I'm going to preface this by saying that in this case, the authoritarian move, it may be that we have to look at it where we don't get to the point where we're talking about a military invasion. We need to work through this. What is happening here is that Donald Trump, who just simply likes to take stuff, I'm going to take stuff. I'm going to take oil. Venezuela's oil. I might take Iran's oil. Might take Iraq's oil. Who likes to try, I'll take the Panama Canal. So Donald Trump, who likes to take stuff that isn't his. And his advisors who want to exercise power, who want to undermine the European Union, who do not believe in any alliances whatsoever. Therefore, they don't believe they're beholden to NATO. The play here is to try to bully Denmark into making concessions. The Trump officials let it be known that they're drafting a compact of free association. A compact of free association is what they have with certain Pacific islands, Micronesia, Palau, the Marshall Islands. And it gives the U.S. priority economic access, and the U.S. is responsible for the defense and foreign policy agreement. But to do that, Greenland has to be independent, because you can't just simply expect Denmark to hand over its own territory and say the U.S. is responsible for the defense and foreign policy of it. But even if Greenland becomes independent, the large majority of Greenlanders do not want to be part of the United States, and they do not want the U.S. to have a privileged position in Greenland. So somehow you've got to split Greenland away, and then you have to be able to bribe people in Greenland to accept the deal that you're making. So you act almost, you swamp in there, coming out of the Death Star, and you say, look, we have this space of Greenland and so on, and if we don't get it, what the hell? We'll blow it up. We'll just throw it up, and I think they did that in Star Wars episode, the first one, if I remember correctly. Just blow up a planet. So it's like, we will go in and we will blow up an alliance here, right? If we don't get what we want.
The strategy is a little confusing to me, because obviously they say that negotiations are their preference, but Marco Rubio is meeting Danish officials this week, I think on Wednesday. I mean, is saying this now really, that doesn't seem really to track when you're meeting with Danish officials in that same week?
Because there is a split in the administration. And for all my ranting here, I think that when it comes to foreign policy as opposed to the domestic side of this, there is sort of a division within the administration. Rubio is absolutely on board with what they're doing with Venezuela, which is why, even though it's absolutely cack-handed, which is why they don't have any idea where they proceed next in Venezuela. And they are going to run into problems there. Rubio's on board with it because he wants to see at least regime coercion take place. When it comes to Europe, Rubio is more on the side of, look, we still need to cooperate with Europe. We still need to be involved with folks. So what happens is when Trump starts saying, send in the Marines, blah, 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 send in whoever, Delta Force to take over Ukraine, Rubio starts telling media, oh, no, Trump's just talking about buying it, right? And then that's why the Europeans said, we want a meeting with Rubio. He's the adult in the room, if you will, here, right? J.D. Vance is not. J.D. Vance just wants to punch Europe in the nose, right? And so that's not going to work there. Stephen Miller, Trump's evil dark prince in the shadows. You can't talk to him. So we're going to get Rubio. So we got to see how that meeting plays out on Wednesday. You also have to realize, Fergus, that as much as I've warned about authoritarianism, we talked about, does the system still hold and what? There are a lot of U.S. military officials that work with Europeans in NATO. They don't want to see NATO be shredded because Donald wants stuff, right? And Donald Trump Jr. wants to pose with an American flag over nuke. So you've got people in NATO, you've got people in the intelligence agencies, you've got people in the diplomatic communities who know how serious this rubbish is. It's just that Trump won't back off because there's a faction in the administration that still operate on the Death Star principle, right? And that does include Vance. So watch where the meeting goes with Rubio. As always, deal with Trump's crazed statements, and then watch if Vance breaks cover. See if Vance breaks cover to support one side or the other on this, and we get a clue where this goes next.
We will be watching all of that. We are almost out of time. Just want to ask you something very quickly, Scott. I spoke with Ambassador John Bolton last week, and he used the term that I've seen sort of labelled against Trump quite a lot, was that he's a lame duck president. I just wanted to get your take on that, because for a lame duck president, he seems to be pushing through a lot at the start of this year.
Look, it may well be the case that the U.S. economy, which is running into trouble, will be the undoing of Trump. It may well be the case that higher healthcare costs will erode Trump's standing. It may well be that the Epstein scandal, which has not gone away, will cause Trump further problems. All of that could be in play. There is sort of a logical explanation of politics here that we can talk about, but we're beyond the logical here, right? This is not the case of talking about lame duck presidents as we would with any of Trump's predecessors. It is also the case that a threatened animal is at its most dangerous. So I'm loving my analogy today. It may not work or whatever. When Darth Vader felt he was threatened by these ragtag rebels and so on, he didn't say, I'm a lame duck master of the galaxy. That's it. I'm just going to go off into retirement. He went off and tried to destroy more stuff. So the threat becomes even greater if Trump feels like he's not succeeding. To take it all the way back to the start of our conversation, he doesn't feel like he's succeeding with the economy, and he doesn't like Jerome Powell. So what does he do? Does he retreat? Does he back down? No. He carries out more threats. He doesn't necessarily feel like they're getting rid of all the immigrants and that they're winning on the immigration issue. So does he back away? Does Stephen Miller back away? Does Kristi Noem back away? No, they don't. They pour more agents into more communities. So no, with respect, elbows up. Elbows up, whether you're in the US, whether you're in the UK, whether you're in Canada, whether you're in Ireland, across Europe, around the world, elbows up. We are in, and I would say, although I hesitate, it is unprecedented territory. I can give you comparisons that are kind of like this, but the combination of this authoritarian, the power of the American system, and the escalation of the damage through social media means, this is a defining point for our histories.
Scott, thank you so much for coming on the Trump Report. We always appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir. Hang in there.
And thank you very much for watching. A reminder once again, if you're looking for Times Radio content, please do head to the Times' YouTube channel. We'll be here on the Trump Report bringing you episodes every Monday through Friday on our YouTube channel. And you can also still listen and follow the show wherever you get your podcast. Just search for the Trump Report in your podcast app. And we'll see you next time.